Well, Luke, I don't want to put you on the spot since this is your first time being here, but if you've got questions, it's just kind of a free for all here. So if you've got questions, we can talk about all your book questions. If you'd rather listen in first and let somebody else go first, we can have somebody else go first, whatever you want.
Yeah,
Since you're
no,
the new guy, we want to give you some time.
sure. No, I appreciate that. I just started to dive in kind of the workout yesterday, so I honestly don't even have any questions at this point. So I don't know what I don't know, but I know I've been in and around this program, I guess, for a while, Josh. I mean, I know I signed up, paid at one point, and then backed out. Here I am back again. I know the value of getting a book out there, but I'm sure I totally underestimate the work that it takes to do that. So no, I'm excited to be a part of it. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to be here. So I'm just going to be a fly on the wall today. And then hopefully in weeks to come, I'll have a lot more questions and contributions.
Cool. Sounds great. By
Well,
the way,
I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Gene.
No, go ahead and finish what you're going to say, Luke.
Well, I was just this had nothing to do with anything other than books, but I just wanted to share this interesting insight into the publishing industry. I don't think this will help anybody with anything, but I was at a family reunion over the weekend, and one of my wife's cousins' husbands I was talking to, I was asking him, so what are you doing these days? I haven't seen him in 10 years. And he said, oh, I'm working in the publishing industry. So I perked up. I was like, oh, me too. Like, let's talk. Like, what are you doing? And he works for a company that does two things. One is they get books, best-selling books, and their clients are Costco and Sam's Club and huge places that sell lots of bestseller type books. And he said, we buy the book that Costco wants to carry. So anything you see at Costco that's a book, it goes through this company. He said, we buy the book, we open the packaging, we stick a sticker on the book for Costco that they want on the book. Then we put the book back in a box and we ship it to Costco. That's one of the things they do. They stick a sticker on the book for Costco because Costco doesn't want to go to the hassle of sticking their own stickers on books. And the other thing they do is if Costco has a book they want to promote and they want to put it like out on the end of an aisle or something, then this company will print out the cardboard display type thing that they can set up at Costco and stack the books on it. That's all they do. $6 billion business, sticking stickers on books and printing out cardboard stands for books. That's all they do. And it's a $6 billion business. I just thought that was fascinating, but it goes to show you the scale of this book industry in the United States because they're only in the US. So.
Yeah, that
Real
is
quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, did you get into any discussion of if they're seeing like more non-traditional publishing books come through from Costco, like the shift in maybe your big players to smaller players?
You know, that would have been a great question because I know that Costco carries local books. Sometimes you can find a book in a Costco at Arizona or Utah or whatever, and it's like a local book by a local person and you won't find it anywhere outside of that state. I'm not sure if those books go through this company or not. I would assume they do, but primarily they're dealing with bestsellers. But he said they also deal with a lot of educational books. So there's books on math and reading and writing for kids and stuff. But that would have been a good question. I'll have to follow up and ask him that. All right, Gene, you go.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a story and then a question. So I have a cousin, and he is a very successful entrepreneur. He started off as a programmer, and then he started an e-commerce business by accident when his wife needed wedding linens for their wedding, and they had to import them from China. And they had extra linens, and people started asking for them. Long story short, he built an e-commerce site because he's a programmer for his wife to import wedding linens from China. And then he started teaching people how to do e-commerce. And now he's a very successful, kind of like a Jeff Walker type, but his niche is helping people with e-commerce. And he recently came to Southern California for kind of like a family reunion, and he just published his book. It's called The Family First Entrepreneur.
Cool.
And he got, it's his first book, and he got signed to a 6-figure publishing deal. And I'm pretty sure that's because he has a, he has a list with, maybe, 500,000 people on it. So the publisher knows he's going to sell a lot of books because he has a huge business. He has a list. He actually runs something called the Supplier Summit, which is kind of like a PLF Live, like a Jeff Walker event or something like that. And so my question is, how can I, because I asked him this question, I said, hey, can you give me a referral to your publisher just so I can pitch them my book idea? And I don't really care if they sign me or not. I don't expect they will, but their feedback will help me perhaps write another book. And what he told me was he hired somebody to pitch his book. And so he actually doesn't have a contact with the publisher. He did this all through an agency that created a pitch for him to pitch this book, and that's how he got signed. So my question to you, Josh, is how can I self-pitch a publisher without paying an agency who has connections with the publisher to pitch my book?
Yes. So this is the way the book industry works. In order to get a publisher, you have to have an agent. They will not, not every publisher is this way, but any major publisher will not talk to you unless you have an agent. And then they won't really talk to you. They'll just talk to your agent. So literary agents or book agents will take a 15% cut of whatever your book makes for eternity. That's the way it works. It's always 15%. It's not 10, it's not 20, it's always 15. They don't charge anything up front. If any agent ever asks you to pay something up front, then there's something weird going on, because that's not the norm. But so instead of going publisher shopping, what you do is you go agent shopping, and you're pitching agents, and then they go out and they try to sell your book and start a bidding war and sell it to the highest bidder. And there might be some exceptions to this, but that's generally the way it works in the publishing industry. So if you want to pitch an agent, then there's a kind of a generally accepted format, which is you write what's called a query letter, and there are whole books on writing query letters. There's one book in particular that is the book, and I'm looking it up because I don't remember the title of it offhand.
Yeah, so while you're looking that up, in his case, he just hired an agent. He paid someone to pitch his book. Now, obviously, he also paid someone to ghostwrite the book. I mean, he has a very successful, like 8-figure business. So
Yeah.
he was able to pay somebody to pitch his book, pay somebody to ghostwrite it, pay somebody to do all of that stuff.
Yeah. So in his case, I don't know if he worked out a different deal with the agent so that maybe he said, I don't want to give up 15%, but I'll pay you this much up front instead or something. And maybe the agent felt like that was a good deal, since maybe the agent didn't.
So agents usually don't take money up front?
They usually don't. They usually
Oh.
take 15%, and they'll work essentially for free until they sell your book. Now, they're not going to take your book unless they think they can go sell it for
Right.
enough that it's going to make it worth their time.
Right.
And that's why it gets hard to pitch agents, is they're trying to look at your book and say, is this, I've got 100 books I could go sell, but I only have time to sell 10. So which 10 out of the 100 do I want to choose to spend my time on? But this is actually a pretty good book on writing query letters. And you have to do this for the publisher as well. So you do this to get the agent, but then you'll have to refine this with the agent to go pitch the publisher as well. I know I have another one here that's a good one, but I'm just not finding it.
Well, let me ask another really relevant question.
Sure. Ask
Based on
away.
your
I can hear you while I'm looking for the book.
I would assume that most of these agents and most of these publishers, they don't really care how well your book is written and what the content is. They only care how many they can sell, which means the majority of that decision, whether they pitch your book or publish your book, will be based on how big of a following you already have. So if I don't have a big following, should I not even consider pitching a traditional publisher?
The short answer is yes. You're correct.
Yeah, that's what I
I
thought.
mean, it really, they will say that they want to publish great books and they're always looking for great books. But at the end of the day, they've got to put food on the table and they've got to support their business, and they get rewarded for finding authors who are going to sell a lot of books. So if you've got an email list of 500,000 like your friend, then yeah, they look at that and they say, okay, well, will 10%, 20% of these people buy the book? Then that's enough. We can give this guy a book deal. If they're looking at somebody with no email list and no social media following and no audience, then they're saying, well, this person's going to sell about 10 books. And they're not going to give that person an advance or a deal, because the thing is, the publishers don't do any marketing. They're not, even your friend who has this book that is probably selling tens of thousands of copies, the publisher is likely doing zero marketing for that book. They just
Yeah,
have no interest in it. They know that he's going to go out and sell that book. So they're looking for authors who are going to market and sell their own book. They don't want to deal with having to market the book themselves. The only time a publisher is going to put money behind marketing a book is if it's Prince Harry or Hillary Clinton or somebody who's celebrity status. Then they're going to market that book. But it's only the blockbusters that really get the marketing budget and the marketing strategy. Everybody else
right.
is on their own.
Yeah, he's already got he's already got his email list, his YouTube channel, his blogs, his podcasts. That's all there. So it's basically just sending out one message to all of his followers that, hey, I got this new book out. So
Yeah.
he got a 6-figure advance. So that was pretty good.
So what I'm curious about is why he even went through a traditional publisher at all versus just self-publishing.
Oh, I asked him that question.
Yeah.
And
What
he
did
said,
he
he said the short answer is ego.
say? Well, there you go.
I asked him that exact question because, I'm self-published. Obviously, I don't have a following and I don't have a 8-figure business like he does. But I just asked him, I said, why did you pay money to have somebody do that? He just said ego.
Yeah. Which publisher did he end up publishing with?
You can look it up on
Oh,
Amazon.
yeah.
It's
I guess
called
I
The
could look.
Family First Entrepreneur. I
Yeah.
think it was Riley, maybe. I'm not sure. You pull it up real quick, you'll find it. Family First
Yeah.
Entrepreneur. That's on Amazon.
Of
Of course, it's on a lot of. It's also available on almost every book platform if you go to the landing page.
It's Harper Business.
Harper Business.
That's a good imprint. That's a big one.
It's a big one, right?
Yep.
So yeah.
Well, I hope it satisfies his ego and gives him everything he was looking for with that.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's a waste of money to satisfy your ego, because I mean, in reality, 0.001% of the people reading this book will ever look at the spine and look at who published it. But if it makes him feel good, then that's great.
Well, for him, the whole basis of his book, Family First Entrepreneurs, he can create an 8-figure business spending less than 20 hours a week on his business.
Which is
And
great.
so,
I mean, it sounds like a great book.
yeah. So everything that he does is basically to optimize for time, including once you reach scale, you outsource everything.
Mhm. Cool.
Yeah.
By the way, the other book I was looking for is this one, How to Write a Book Proposal. This is by Jody Rain, Rein, and Michael Larson. But this is, if you want to get a traditional publisher, this is the book to read, because it talks all about writing your book proposal, getting an agent, and all that stuff. So
Yeah, it's like what we said at the beginning. I don't really want to go down that path unless somebody can just introduce me to somebody who's actually even willing to read the book proposal.
yeah.
And otherwise, I know that my social media following and people who are ready to buy my book is not big enough for really generating any interest.
Yeah. It is educational, though. I mean, I wouldn't discourage anybody from pitching an agent or trying to get an agent if they really want to do it, because you're going to learn something in the process no matter what. And that might be valuable, especially some literary agents can be quite blunt. And so if they tell you your book stinks, it's a terrible title, this whole idea is terrible, well, that might be great feedback to get from somebody who's in the book industry so that you don't spend a bunch of time writing a book that isn't going to do well. And so there's great feedback to get if you can take it.
Yeah. So are agents generally willing to read your pitches to them? Like, do you need a referral to an agent?
As with everything in life, it's who you know, not what you know.
Right.
So, for example, I'm actually working with a client right now on pitching his book to an agent. And I don't know if I showed this to anybody before, but uh, so this guy's a literary agent, and here are some of the books that he's been involved with. This last one, Bad Blood, if you remember the whole scandal with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, the company that said that they could perform 200 different tests out of a drop of blood. And she was on the cover of every business magazine about 7 or 8 years ago. But this book is all about that and what happened. So this guy, Eric Lupfer, he was the agent for Bad Blood, which became this huge, massive bestseller and will probably pay for his salary for the rest of his life and his retirement fund and then some. And the great thing about it too is that now that he's the agent for this book, of course, other people are seeking him out when they have, I mean, big authors with big books are seeking him out and saying, hey, I want this guy as my agent because he was the agent on this book. So this guy's really got it made. And I have a client who's wealthy and has the money to put behind his book and make sure that it's good and that it sells well. And so he's going after this guy to be his agent. But if you come to a website like this, and this is for a company that is a company, it's a literary agency. So they have a bunch of different agents who work for them. And if you go under here, under who we are, then you've got all these different literary agents and your founder and other support staff and such. But this whole company exists to help authors to get good deals with publishing. And then they have these submission guidelines, which are interesting. And again, even if you're self-publishing and you don't need this, it's interesting to look at this because it shows you what professional authors are doing. And this type of thing can either just be helpful to know, or it can be helpful to go through this exercise. And so in this case, they say, send us a brief synopsis and the first 5 to 10 pages of your book, essentially, the manuscript, paste it into the body of an email. And that's it. That's all they want. Really brief overview of what the book is, basically the back cover of the book or the inside flap, but the description of the book. Send us a description of the book and the first 5 or 10 pages. And that's it. And you send that to a literary agent. Now, are they going to read it? Maybe, but how much of it are they going to read? They're probably going to read until they know what the answer is, yes or no. And more often than not, the answer is going to be no. And the answer is probably going to be no 99% of the time within probably not even getting to the manuscript, probably just the synopsis. Because I'm guessing that these people are honed enough in their craft that they read that synopsis and they're like, no, bad idea. I don't even need to read the 5-10 pages. And that's it. It's gone. So now let's say that you're just not very good at writing a synopsis for your book, or maybe the first 5 to 10 pages aren't that great. I mean, there are a lot of people who have great books inside of them, but they're not writers. They're not authors. And so they might send something in and it's not that great. That's where it really helps to have a connection and know somebody, because then you can go through the person you know and that person can vouch for you and say, hey, Eric, my friend is the CEO of this $5 billion company, and he went through all this experience and everything, and it's great, and he wants to hire a book writer and write this book, but he's not a writer, but he's got this great story. Well, now Eric might be willing to take a look at that and say, hey, well, let me talk to him. And you can skirt that whole process and talk directly to somebody like Eric and maybe get him on board with you without having to go through that book proposal and query letter process. That would be a better way to do it if you have those connections. So in my case with my client, I went on LinkedIn and I looked at Eric Lupfer's profile, and I saw who was connected to him that I know. And it turns out I knew 3 people who are connected to Eric. I reached out to all 3 of them and I said, how well do you know Eric? And 2 of them said, I don't really know him that well. We're just connected randomly. But one responded and said, yeah, I went to college with him. We're good friends. And I said, would you be willing to reach out to him and see if I could talk to him directly about one of my clients? And he said, yeah, sure, I'd be happy to reach out. So I'm in the middle of that process right now, but that's the route I'm trying to go for my client, because I know that that's much more likely to end in success than me just
And you
sending
have
in
a
a
client where
proposal.
money is no object.
Right.
Those are great clients to have.
Yeah. Now he has 0 audience though, so that's
Yeah.
an issue, but he has other things going for him. He's been involved in some notable things that are in the news, and he's got money to spend. So there are other things that would make him attractive to a publisher.
Okay. All right. Well, that's my question. Thanks, Josh.
All right. You happen to ask a question that I was really prepared to answer because I've been diving into all this stuff the last week or 2. So thank you.
Yep.
All right. Welcome, Virginia. Welcome, Daniel. Well, who wants to go next? Cade, Virginia, Daniel?
I'll go. I've started going through the workbook, by the way. It's awesome. I've really enjoyed it. One
Thank you.
question I have, as I'm getting more specific, I find myself feeling like I have to separate who I'm writing to, like make a decision of, am I writing to this group or this group? Because they're slightly different. And it's not like one, so part of what I do is a certain type of engineering task that many engineers do. And part of what I do is more how the business is structured, consulting, right? And so I feel like initially I was just writing it for consulting engineers, but I do this really specific task that I also have a lot of traction and probably more followers on social media interested in that. So it's easier to get feedback on that. So I feel like there's 3 options: write to consulting specific task, or write just to the engineering task, or write to consultants. Do you find it's best to do the most specific one? Because it feels narrowing and it feels like, oh, I just shrunk my audience, less impact. But is that accurate? And it's probably better to have a better book for fewer people than it is to have a terrible book for lots of people, right?
Yeah, as a general rule, the more focused, the more niche your audience is that you're focusing on, the more impactful the book will be for that audience than if you write something that's broader. I mean, that's the general rule,
Yeah.
but there are exceptions to that. And so you look at a book like 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. He could have written that book and said, well, I'm going to write 7 habits for business executives. But instead, he turned it into a general self-help book, and it's been this massive bestseller. That's a book that if he were pitching that book to a publisher and they said, who's your audience? He would say, everyone. And that's what it literally was. It was a book for everyone. And agents and publishers hate that answer, that it's for everyone. And yet it was a book for everyone. So there are books that are for everyone, and there are books for larger audiences and more niche audiences. But as a general rule, the more niche you go, the more success your book is going to have with that audience. But the devil's in the details. And so there's always this question of, well, what about with my specific audience? Where should I stop focusing down or niching down? When should I call it good? Or should I open it up and make it a little bit more broad in terms of the audience I'm trying to capture? And there's no way that I can answer that question for you. It's a question that you have to figure out for yourself. But I will say this: 99% of authors left on their own are going to go too broad rather than too niche. It's really rare that somebody gets too niche. And so I would just advise to guard against that and keep that in mind, that no matter what you do, you'll probably go too broad rather than too niche. The other thing is, you often figure this out as you're writing the book. And so rather than getting paralyzed and saying, oh, I'm not sure who to write for, just pick somebody and keep writing. And
Okay.
you might get halfway through the book and say, you know what? No, I need to back up and do it the other way. Or you might make it more broad and say, I'm just going to go with it and start writing that. And you get through it halfway and say, no, I need to niche down. So whatever you do, just keep on writing. Don't let it paralyze you. Just choose one and go with it. You can always change it later. It's not that big a deal necessarily. So keep writing, and that will fix the majority of problems you might run into with not knowing exactly who your audience is.
Yeah. Back to comments about how much of good writing is editing, right? So
Yeah.
got to start somewhere. Okay. Thanks, Josh. That's really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I'll
That's
give
all
a,
oh,
sure. No, go ahead. That was just your only question
yeah,
you were
that's
saying.
all I've got. Yep.
Yeah, just to follow up to that. I mean, I'm working on a memoir, and when I started writing it, my audience was my wife and my kids, and maybe my parents and my siblings. And so that's who I was thinking of as the audience. And then as it's gone on, I've thought, well, maybe I want to actually publish this, and maybe it's of interest to anybody who's adopted, because that's a central part of my book, is adopting our daughter. And so I've gone back and forth about who the audience is, but I started out with one audience that was extremely small, and then it's changed over time, and that has changed how I've thought about the book. I've thought, oh, maybe this is too personal. Maybe I won't share this because maybe I'm going to publish it. And I've gone back and forth with that, but I didn't let that stop me from writing the book. All right, Daniel, you've got a question. Let's see. Are you able to?
Okay,
There we
all
go.
right, I'm on mute. Yeah, kind of along a continuation of Kate's question, because you have already advised me is to stick with a general version of the book and then go into a specific targeting audience with book 2. So what I'm doing is doing the intercultural competence between the East and West in a very general sense, and then there will be book 1.A, which is for people from the West having to work with people in the East, and then book 1.B being the other way around, whether for Asians working with Western business. So do you think that would be a better idea? Because of the first book will be like Frankovic and sell out, and then people want to be more specific, then they go buy book 2.
Right. So again, the devil's in the details here.
Okay.
The mistake a lot of people make is they think if that their book is written for everybody, that they're going to sell more books. And usually the opposite is true.
That's not my idea. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's hard to focus that book down, because you feel like you're leaving money on the table. It feels like you're giving up people who would buy the book, and now they're not going to, because I'm focusing on this niche audience.
Yeah.
And I think we talked before about the idea of doing a book that is more general, like The Miracle Morning. I think we talked about this.
That was your
right?
example you gave me.
Right. So The Miracle Morning, he wrote a general book, and then he has 20 books that are specific within that book. So Miracle Morning for network marketers, and Miracle Morning for realtors, and all that stuff. So I think the reason that worked for him is because his first book was a massive bestseller. And so the trick for him was he wrote a book, it became a massive bestseller, and then it was just like printing money. Hey, I can write these 20 other books. I'll partner with other people. They can write the books. I don't even have to write them. But it gets my name out there more, and these people will do the marketing for the book because they're a co-author on it. And it just feeds into his business empire.
Yeah.
So for him, that was great, and it was smart. Now, your book, I don't want to discourage you, but we don't know how it's going to sell. So let's say that your book is not a massive bestseller, your first book that's more general. Writing a second book that's more niche is not going to turn your first book into a bestseller, nor is it going to turn your second book into a bestseller. If you've got a book that's not a bestseller and a follow-up book that's not a bestseller, then you have 2 non-bestsellers, not 2 books that are going to magically turn each other into bestsellers. So writing more books does not necessarily equate to selling more of all the books. However, it does happen sometimes. I've talked to multiple authors who have said, I wrote a book and nobody bought it. And I wrote another book and nobody bought it. And then I wrote a third book and all of a sudden everybody bought all 3 books. And so things like that do happen. I was actually talking to another one of my wife's cousins at this family reunion, and she's a successful fiction author, and she's written something like 40 books or something. It's crazy. But she said, I said, how are your books selling? And she said, there's a funny thing about it. It's always the 5th book that sells really well in my series that I write. So I write a series,
Okay.
and once I get to the 5th book, then all of a sudden the sales really start going. And she doesn't know why, and I don't know why that is, but it's kind of funny. So
Yeah.
sometimes that happens, and I've heard that from multiple people, that they've said that
Yeah.
it wasn't their first book, it was a follow-on book that
Right.
sold.
Okay. So in her
um,
case, yeah, in her case, 5th books, and being Chinese, probably my 8th book, right, Gene? 8th book. Yeah.
There's
Okay.
another example of this. If you have kids or teenagers, you may have heard of a book series called the Tuttle Twins.
Yeah.
And my friend is the creator of that series, and he said the same thing. In fact, I don't know if it was the 4th book when he said they really started to sell, or if it was like the 14th book. I think they have about 20 books now, but he said the more books that he publishes, the more they all sell. And so he's up to 20 or 22 or 25 books at this point. And now it's at the point where it literally is printing money for him. As soon as he gets those books out, they just sell like crazy, and it sells more of all the books in the series whenever he releases a new book in the series.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anyways, yesterday being a Hong Kong morning for Super Bowl, we were at the American Club, and after the game, there was a lot of bottles that need emptying. So a lot of us stayed behind to, clean up. And someone of the guy came up with an idea, and many of the other friends in my circle seem to like the idea, is to crowdsource my book within the circle. Okay, now you know who goes to the American Club in Hong Kong. So we're talking about people who are in the big 5 consulting firm and the big 10 investment banks, and they think it's a good idea that they put it together, and then there'll be a paragraph inside the book about how the book was financed, and everybody would get credit, and they would pitch so much money, small change, and then I would give them 100 or 200 copies of book that they give away, like they pay for the book in advance. So what do you think of that idea? Like these guys, because who they are and the fact that they're giving my book to other people is probably the best publicity I could get. Like, friends.
If you think it's going to be a benefit to the book, then go for it. Now, whenever you involve other people in the book process, you give up some control, and you have to deal with overhead and project management and a bit of a mess. My first book, it was not crowdsourced, but it was interviews. I interviewed 30 people for my first book.
Yeah.
Well, the great part was I didn't have to write the book. The downside was I had to corral 30 people into doing interviews, and then I had to edit their interviews. And it ended up, by the time I was done, I felt like, gee, this would have been easier to write a book myself than to interview these people and get them involved. And they had to check everything off, and then they would edit it, and then I'd have to incorporate their edits. And it was a bit of a headache. So there are those trade-offs, but at the same time, for the same reasons that you're thinking about it, when I wrote my book, I thought, well, gee, if I'm interviewing these famous people, they're going to talk about my book, and that's going to help it get out there, and their names are on the book. So there's that credibility, and all that's true. And so I wouldn't change it if I could go back, because I now have a book for the rest of my life where I can say, hey, I interviewed the chief marketing officers from Target and Spotify and PayPal, and I can talk about that in relation to my book, and that's major credibility for me. So I'm glad I did it that way, but it was a lot of work. It wasn't easier, but it was better, I felt like.
Because by the time we left the American Club, I already had 12 commitment of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars. and then 8 more heard about this and want to pitch in and just support the book, and then just get their name in the book as the financial backer, and then they get 100 copies of the book to give out.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is basically corporate sponsorship. I mean, sort of what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
in
but
a
you
more
can go to-
minor way. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go to companies and say, hey, do you want to sponsor this book?
Mhm.
And companies will sometimes become a corporate sponsor for a book and essentially help you fund writing that book in
Right.
exchange for something, whatever it is they want out of it.
Okay, so McKinsey might call and just say, we want to be part of this book, but we'll publish it, and you just get author and then work out the financial arrangement. Would that be something, is what you're saying?
Right. I mean, you could pitch McKinsey and say, hey, do you want to sponsor this book? It's X amount. And in exchange, here's what you're going to get.
Mhm.
Some sort of placement in it. And of course, we can write it in such a way that it's of interest to your people. And they might actually have, I mean, with a company like McKinsey, they might have a defined process for how they set that up,
Mhm.
because this might be something they do on a regular basis.
Yes, they
Uh,
do. Yeah.
Right. So you might talk to them and just say, hey, when you do corporate sponsorships of books, what's your process? What are the rules or guidelines? What does that
Mhm.
look like to create a successful partnership?
Mhm. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right. Whenever you get back to Hong Kong, we'll go visit all your favorite food joints.
Hopefully soon. They're
Yes.
giving away free plane tickets now. So I
No,
don't have
well,
that much
you
of an
you have to
excuse, right?
qualify. You have to qualify.
They should
Yeah.
they should just give them away to everybody.
Yeah. Mhm.
I heard they're giving away 500,000 tickets or something.
Yes, there's going to be 500,000 ticket, and the number that I heard is there'll be 50,000 tickets that will be distributed between Canada and US, and they're going to figure out how it's going to work out. Like who gets it, like a random draw or something. And then the other thing is that the airlines are saying they rather use the money on subsidizing a BOGO. Buy one, get one free companion ticket type of arrangements. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
everything's still up in the air. But seeing that you have spent so much time here, as soon as I hear the word of how to get a ticket, I'll email you.
all right. Sounds great.
Yeah. Okay. And yeah. Mhm.
Thanks,
Okay.
Daniel.
You think Jason would be interested in joining the book?
Talk to him. Ask him.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Maybe get MWI to sponsor this.
Yeah, maybe MWI can sign on as a corporate sponsor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll keep you guys in mind.
All right. Thanks,
Yeah.
Daniel.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
All right, Virginia, your turn. Just got to unmute though.
So this has been really great. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. Well, I'm in sort of a maze here. As I think I probably mentioned, I switched over from a book I had worked up for a long time, and I'm working on a new one. And I've been dealing with people like Hay House and some of these others where that people pay publishers. So I really kind of was, and from what I've studied, I didn't realize almost that they were still giving advances for books. So I've been very interested in hearing what you have to say. And that's a whole other opportunity. And I've been very, very fortunate because I have 2 or 3 people that have hundreds of thousands of emails and lists like that, and they're quite well known in their industries. And they've offered to support me. So I don't know how you sort of, put that into the proposal, if you just list their names and, that kind of stuff. And
So,
go ahead.
So to the question about advances, yes, publishers are still giving advances, but they're a lot smaller than they used to be. And so what I see is that a lot of the people are, I would say, I think I'm safe saying the majority of people getting advances don't need the advance and don't care about the advance. It's kind of like when you go to a bank for a loan, the only people they loan money to are the people who don't need the money. And the people who need the money can't get a loan. It's kind of like that with book advances. If you really need one, they don't want to give it to you. And if they give one to you, you don't really care because you're rich or you have this big list, you're going to sell a bunch anyway. So You can chase in advance, but in my opinion, the work and the effort of chasing that advance is probably not worth it. Now, for somebody like Jean's friend, the idea, I mean, if you have a huge email list that's your own, you can walk into a publisher and say, I've got this huge email list. I want to write a book. I don't even know what it's going to be about. Will you give me an advance? And they'll say yes, because they know whatever you write is going to sell a bunch because you've got this huge list.
Gotcha.
Now, if it's a friends list, that becomes a little bit more iffy. Now, if you can get commitments from these friends saying, I will promote Virginia's book to my list, and my list is this big, and it needs to show that that list is aligned with the topic of your book. The thing when you have a list, of course, your book's going to be aligned with what your audience is interested in. That's probably how you built up your audience in the first place. But you'd have to do a little bit of sales work to convince a publisher that somebody else's list is going to be as good for you as your own list would be. So that's something you could use to your advantage. But again, when we're talking about lists, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of active subscribers. Jean's friend has 500,000 subscribers. My friend got a $250,000 or $220,000 advance as a first-time author, but he had, I think, 200,000 subscribers on his list. So if you have a huge email list, then you can get a big advance on a book. But I've only heard of it done when it's your own list. I haven't heard any figures or case studies where it was using somebody else's list.
Well, I appreciate that. And very fortunately, these people each have 500,000 or more people on their lists, and they're in my industry. So I didn't
Yeah.
realize, I'm just, and like you said, I ride the horse in the direction that it's going, and you learn
Mhm.
something new in every situation. So that's why I'm looking at this. And one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm looking at Spare, which is Prince Harry's book, and Jared Kushner's White House memoir. And I've been looking at those to see how they're written, to see how they flow, and I'm hoping I'm on the right track. And then the other day, one fell into my lap from a woman from this publisher that I told you about that was going to give me they were going to, whatever they call it, acquire the book. And it's Dare to Be You. So I'm hoping this is time well spent, because I think that's they told me with this book, as opposed to the first one, that it's really, really good. It's going to sell a lot of books and all of that stuff, which they didn't tell me so much before. And a couple of people have told me that. So this Dare to Be You is by a big PR person in Boston. And I think that that's going to be a big help for me in terms of the way that publisher structures a book, and B, what is selling. And I'm going to do research and see how much of it is sold and all that. So I hope that that's a valuable use of my time. Would you agree?
It sounds like it. If you've got those connections, you've got people already telling you it's a good idea. If you've got the people who have these huge email lists, then those are game changers. So, and it doesn't hurt to talk to people and see what comes back, see what kind of offers you can get.
What
If
do
you
mean,
had a
Rob?
friend who
What
has
do
a
you mean,
list
Rob?
with 10,000 subscribers, then I'd be saying, that's not enough to do anything anyway. And if you didn't have contacts who were telling you to move forward with the book, then I'd say it's going to be a lot of uphill work to even get an agent interested in it. But it sounds like you've got people talking to you who are the right people to know. And so it doesn't hurt to spend a little bit of time and just see what comes back, because you can always turn it down and say no.
Well, I haven't, I had to, for my sanity, decide, because I spent an awful lot of time on that first book. And then to find out sort of at the end that it was all wonderful, but it wasn't going to sell. Everybody has some of those in their life. I'm a big girl, I know that, but I try to not walk around the same mistake more than once. That's the definition of insanity. I keep doing the same thing. So The other piece of this, which has kind of confused me, and this is helping me so much to have someone to bounce these ideas off of, is that I was a master curriculum development person for one of the top 10 school systems in the United States. And then I did a whole bunch of work in one career many, many years ago. I'm good at it. So I'm looking, so then now I have some of these kingpin. I'm just very fortunate with people that have come to support me. That are master online people. So then I started getting like very confused. I'm trying to watch their online things and what you do. And finally, I just had to say, I'm now I have all of these different workbooks and notes and things here. And I'm going to go back to, I have 26 years worth of journals, and I'm going to go back to the journals, not 26 years ago, but the journals from when this work that I'm talking about, neuroscience and brainwave entrainment that helped me go from one horrible situation to where I am right now. You're looking at a lot of work, Josh, at me now, and the support of my wonderful friends, you and your other pal in Arizona. I cannot thank you both enough. And just as a quick aside, just to know that that people of this caliber can be so generous did me a whole lot of good, because I bumped into a lot of very greedy people on Wall Street at one point in my life. So it really helped me a lot to see all this happening. So the point is, I decided that I would now go back to my journals as to where in my transformation certain things helped from their products and made all the difference, and all that stuff, and use some of that stuff in my own personal work, so that I can't repeat their processes and their products. But by going through and looking at my reaction to those, I think that might be an excellent place to start in terms of future communications with them and what I'm putting in my book. Would you agree?
You know, whatever you feel like is the place to start that's going to help you get that manuscript done, that's the good place to start. So if you feel like it's good and that motivates you and it's going to help you get that content out on paper, then great.
It's
But
going to help me clarify it in my mind, which is, and the thing is, I'm a senior, so they have people now out in the world that are up to 50, and I'm 75, so there's still going to be a market with that for using their work and things at my age and in my circumstances. And someone Zoom call I was on one day gave me very, very good advice, and they talked about like you just said, that if you start, then things change and become more certain, and the process clarifies itself along the way. And
right.
so
I mean, I repeat myself so much on this point, but it's because it's true. And I see so many authors get stuck. And so my message over and over again is just write. It doesn't matter how you write. It doesn't matter what you write, but just start writing something, no matter how bad it is, no matter how bad the process is. Because if you're writing, you'll figure stuff out. If you're not writing, then you're paralyzed. You're stuck.
And then the other, well, and that's, I started to get paralyzed with all these wonderful people that were giving me these courses and stuff like this. And finally I said, the only way that this sucker is going to happen, pardon my French, is if I do it, I enjoy it, I do the best I can, and I let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. Now you can't worry about anything while you're writing, or at least not much, because every little worry that comes in and nags at you while you're writing is going to slow you down. It's going to stop you. And that's why I tell people, don't think about anybody actually reading this book. I mean, I tell people to think about somebody, like imagine somebody that you're writing to, but don't necessarily think about them actually reading the book. You're writing for them, but at the same time, you don't want to get hung up thinking, oh, wait a second, they're going to think this, I better change this, or I better edit this. It's no, I'm writing for this person, but they're not actually going to read what I'm writing right now. They're going to read a highly edited version of this that comes later.
Well, that was my thought, is that the best thing is to get it all out on paper, and you can always edit it later.
Yeah,
And
you can always edit it later.
And then even I finally had to say to these people that wanted to acquire it, I will get back to you as nicely as I could, because I can't have the pressure if I have all this. And then they sent, and it was like a real honor. I mean, they sent one of their top people who wanted to work with me every day for 6 weeks to like get, and I can't work under that thing right now. And so, but it took me a while to process even that, is
Mhm.
that I just, you know, I said, when I have something to say to you, I'll be back and I'll tell you, but, thank you. So I just want to be sure. And that's what I'm finding, is all of this really is a process. And I think we have to, you know, just kind of do it on our own. But I wanted to know if I'm wasting time, because I tend to be the type too. I was an academic at one point in my life, and I can tend to overthink and overread and over-research things. So I think that these 3 books will give me at least, they're all top people, and they'll give me a sense of, apropos of that comment, chapters are shorter now. The amount you put in chapters is different now. And that's what I'm looking for. So I don't go write these academic things like I used to write,
Mhm.
you know, and I think that's time well spent.
Yep. Now, what you might do is you might get a few pages of this done, rough draft, maybe edit that a little bit, and then share that around with people and get their feedback. Maybe that will change what you write afterwards. Maybe it won't, but it doesn't necessarily hurt to get a little bit of feedback, especially if it's people in the industry, in the publishing industry, who aren't
So
biased about the content.
no, you mean, so send it to some of these publishers and say, are you interested? Or is how, in other words, where do you pick the audience to send that feedback?
I was thinking more like publishers or agents, just sending it around to them and say, I mean, you could say, hey, I'll probably self-publish this, but I'm just curious to send this out to some agents and see what people think and see what kind of feedback you get. Because that would be interesting if somebody came back and said, hey, if you've got this book and I like what you're saying, and you've got these email lists, if you put it into a little bit of a proposal format, it would be interesting to see what comes back.
And send it out to, no, that's an excellent idea. And I have a friend who has written 9 New York Times bestselling books, and he mentioned that if I was interested in agents, to let him know, and he would recommend a couple. So it sounds to me like I should now let him know when I'm
Oh,
ready.
that's the way to go then. I mean, ask your friends, say, hey, can you introduce me to somebody? And then get that introduction and then talk to the agent and say, hey, what would you like me to send you so that you can take a look at it? Do you just want to talk to me, or do you want me to send you a book proposal? And if he
And
says, oh, let's just jump on the phone and chat, great, chat. If he says, well, can you send me a little brief overview and maybe a couple pages so I can just check it out, send that. If he says something else, send that. But having that kind of introduction, that's gold. I mean, that's better than anything else.
no, see, this is what I need to know, because I've been so blessed, and I don't know. And the other acquisition people sent their number 1 guy already to book an hour appointment with me and go over things. So I have those.
Right.
And he's the one, and he didn't say this about my last book. And he was even more humble this time. It's funny, Josh, when you're now writing about people with double-digit millions, how people are a little bit more respectful to you. I forget those days, you know, from my current life. But he now was telling me, he said, no, he said, this book is going to make a lot of money. He didn't tell me that with the first session that we had, you know, about on the other book. So
Well,
it's
it's always
like,
good to have a second opinion. Whether the first opinion is bad or great, it's still good to have a second opinion.
well, the other thing is, and he did say at the end of that, and if you have any questions, contact me, so I can use that.
Yeah,
And I can take that at face value. I don't like to impose on people that I'm not paying.
if he said that he was happy to do it for you, then I'd take him up on that. I mean, people like to serve, people like to help out. It makes them feel powerful. When you come to somebody and you say, hey, I need your help on this, you said you'd make some introductions. I need your help. I'm ready for it. People like that. Makes them feel good.
Wow, this is a very happy Valentine's Day to you all. This is great information. Thank you.
I'll tell you a little quick story. I was once in a Guatemalan jail as a teenager.
Wow.
I was on a trip with my dad and my sister and brother-in-law, and we were in a car accident in Guatemala. We were tourists. We were in a car accident, and the police came, and the law was if there's any blood, everybody goes to jail until you talk to a judge.
Wow.
Well, the driver of the other car who ran into us was knocked out, unconscious, drunk, bleeding. And so they took us to jail. We're a bunch of Americans. We're being taken to a Guatemalan jail. And this was 1993 or so. And the jail was in the middle of a huge junkyard. It was late at night. And I thought, this is like a movie or something. We're going to disappear and never be heard from again. And the jail was what you would think of from a movie. I mean, it was crumbling cement walls painted bright green. And there was a guy at a front desk hunting and pecking away on an old typewriter, and people walking around with M16s and stuff. And we just thought, what in the world did we get ourselves into? And also, it was Friday and the judge wasn't coming in until Monday.
And you had to stay in the jail?
And so, well, we were worried we were going to, but we got a phone call, and we made a phone call, and we talked to some friends, and they said, we know somebody, just sit tight. And about 2 hours later, a guy walked into the jail who looked like he owned the country, and walked in with this 3-piece suit. And long story short, he was able to talk to the chief of police. And 5 minutes later, we were all walking out of the jail. And we ended up getting to know this guy who's a German guy, grew up in Germany, had emigrated to Guatemala. And he started telling us the craziest stories about catching drug kingpins and just all these amazing things he had done. And we didn't know if he was lying or just making it up, but it was so complicated, the stories he was telling us. We thought, nobody can make this stuff up. I mean, this is incredible. But the one thing he said that really stuck with me, I asked him, I said, how do you do these things? How do you get these things done? Like, all these people bend over backwards to do things for you. But how do you get them to do that? And he said, I sincerely ask for their help. And he said, when I go to somebody, I say, hello, my name is Gert Knichnik. That was his name. Hello, my name is Gert Knichnik, and I need your help. And he said, that's my opening line. And he said, I've been able to get private planes that were about to take off on the runway stopped. And then I got on the private plane and flew for free because I told somebody I needed their help and I needed to get somewhere. And they stopped a private plane and put me on the private plane, and all sorts, 100 other things. But that really stuck out to me, that people want to help. And when you're sincere and you say, I need your help, people will bend over backwards. So I do this too. And yeah, it works all the time. But you have to be sincere, of course. Otherwise, it's just manipulation.
No, I very much appreciate this. I come from Boston and I was raised not to bother people. And,
Yeah.
and all that stuff. And so I'm learning. And it was until I finally got in a position where I really did need help, and I got nailed up against the wall, and I never knew how hard I could fight coming back so I appreciate that, Josh.
Well, think about if somebody came to you and they said, Virginia, I need your help. Somebody that you knew and that you liked.
I would, no question.
You would do anything for that person. And other people would do that for you. And if you helped somebody, you would feel so great about helping that person out of a tight spot or helping them to get whatever they needed.
I had to be careful though, Josh, because I'm an empath and I started doing it too much. And so, so I had to, but it's like anything else. So I went the other way. And to learn it, and then you have to get back to the middle with and that's, that's really the truth, is that I really had to, the only one who likes a doormat is someone with dirty feet. I've learned that, and so you have to learn what the boundaries are. But just like I said about all the great people that have helped me, maybe because I had to deal with a lot of those different kinds of people, as my situation drastically changed, I became jaded. And I have to say that all the people that have come to help me, once they knew, because that was the difference, not so many people knew, and once they knew, I've been blessed, completely blessed. So thank you very much.
All right, let us know how it goes.
I will. It was oh no, but this really is, and it's funny how it can happen. All of those things that I was just describing to you were getting blocked in my head, and I was getting immobilized. So now that it's more clear, because everybody keeps sending me all these courses, and finally I just had to put them stop it all and say, this is what the time I need. This is what I need to do right now with this information. You have information overload and you can't move.
Yep. It's true.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, Haley, as always. And this
Hey,
will,
Josh,
yeah.
can you send the link to that, that publishing, that agency site in the chat?
Sure. Here, one
Uh,
second.
If it's just as simple as sending them an email, might as well do it and see how they respond in 4 to 6 weeks.
Can't hurt.
Yeah. I mean, that's a
There it
pretty
is.
easy process. If they only want an email, I've already got the first 5 pages of the book written. So I'll just send it over and see what happens.
Yep. And just make sure don't plug any extra stuff in there. Just send them what they're asking for. And actually, let me send you the exact link to that page with the submission guidelines.
Yeah, just send it in the chat.
Yep, there's that page. So you don't
All
have
right.
to search around for it.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Talk to you next. I think I'll be here next week. I'm not 100% sure because my company, MWI, is having a corporate retreat and I need to check schedules, but I'm pretty sure I'll be here, but I'll let everybody know.
All righty.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.